Hello, I'm Casey Aiken. This is 21 This Week. Coming up next, what can we expect on Super Tuesday, March 1st, 2016? And which Maryland primary Senate race is in a dead heat? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the past president of Progressive Maryland, Elbridge James, former chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, former membership directory for the Maryland Republican Party, Phil Bell, and political strategist, Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. When U.S. Senator Barbara Mikulski announced that she was not going to seek another term, many predicted that Congressman Chris Van Hollen, the third-ranking Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives, had the right stuff to ascend to the Senate. Now, lo and behold, the path to the nomination is proving a bit more challenging than first thought. Elbridge, a recently released poll, the second in 2 months, finds that support for Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Prince George's County and Representative Van Hollen are pretty even. In fact, it's a dead heat. And the most recent poll has Miss Edwards leading by 2%. Can you explain the dynamics of this race?
23% are still undecided. That's number one. But also number two, we have national interests that are putting money and attention on Donna Edwards in this race. I don't really think Chris nor the Democratic Party are really looking at this race until after April and going in that direction. It's still early, and there's still a whole lot of movement that will occur.
Well, but don't you think it's interesting that Miss Edwards is even competitive in this race?
No, she's a good candidate. She's a good candidate, and she's showing her mettle and her worth. I mean, I'm a Chris Van Hollen supporter, but I admire what Donna is doing, and we have two good candidates, so they need to step up their game.
Susan, Congressman Van Hollen has a shocking financial advantage over his counterpart, Congresswoman Edwards, yet Miss Edwards is exceeding expectations, as we just heard. But is your party fracturing along geographic and racial lines?
Well, first of all, Donna Edwards would be nowhere if it weren't for Emily's List. If you look at their contributions, the bulk of Donna Edwards are from out of state. And if it weren't for, as Elbridge alluded to, outside factors, you know, she'd be nowhere. What is making a difference, and the only thing that I could see could make a difference, are women voters. I was at the Democratic brunch last Sunday, and Barbara Mikulski spoke. And there are a lot of people who don't like Donna Edwards at all. But there is their thought that at that point, if she were to win, if she were to lose in the primary, there might not be any women in the Maryland delegation to Washington. And women are thinking about that. Right now, her biggest support seems to be in Baltimore City. We'll see what happens. Her own county executive, Rusher and Baker, endorsed Chris Van Hollen. So I think it's going to come down to the ground game. And I think in that case, Chris will win on that.
But are we seeing a natural a combination of Baltimore and Prince George's County against a Montgomery County candidate?
No.
Well, I would disagree. There is probably a little bit of that. Montgomery County still has sometimes a hurdle to overcome. But also you're looking at basically Donna Edwards as the non-establishment candidate versus the establishment candidate. And so the concern in Baltimore City is that we have in Baltimore City, and I say we because I've talked to a number of people in Baltimore City, have concerns about how the Democratic Party has treated them or not treated them. And so they're looking at someone that'll rally to their cause. They don't understand that with Chris Van Hollen, they get a lot of establishment, a lot of value, and somebody that will bring merit and change for Baltimore City. But right now they're looking at Donna Edwards.
I heard about a woman who was from Baltimore City, and Chris had one of the coffee things. Yeah. And the woman came up to Chris afterwards and said, I came here and I didn't want to like you, but I wanted to hear you, and I'm going to vote for you now. And so I think it's if Chris has enough time to get his message out. I think he will be.
Well,
fine.
I want to go to both Phil and Mark on this. I mean, there is not a natural affinity for statewide elections for Republicans, Phil. But I mean, is this going to be a competitive race for Republicans this time?
Absolutely. It definitely will be competitive, and I think in the last couple of minutes you heard why. You have two candidates, Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen, and there's not a dime of difference between them. They may look different, but they're both liberals. They've both been big supporters of the initiatives of the past few years. What reason is there to say, well, look, there's a great idea to come out and vote for these guys? If you have, and we will have strong candidates on the Republican side that you can look at and say, yes, a Kathy Szeliga, Greg Holmes, otherwise, they're exciting. So there's a great chance.
Let me get Mark in here. Mark?
I think there is a bit of a difference, and Chris Van Hollen has been identified while he's been in the House with sort of the business wing of the Democratic. He's very involved with of course he was head of the campaign committee and raising a great deal of money. And I think that's hurting him because of the sort of Bernie Sanders populist phenomena, that Clinton era catering to the business community.
Is the Black Lives Matter voter in Baltimore, which has been very active and very vocal, is that going to have an influence in this race?
I think at this point, I think it's too early to tell. I really think it's down to the ground game.
Could I come back to that ground game issue?
But not to the point that it'll affect the outcome.
Yeah, that's true. And Susan, you are right about the ground game. That's always what ends up winning.
And in that case, Chris is going to win.
We got to wrap it up. Mark, you have the last word on
Very
this.
quickly, how competitive that presidential primary is will determine how important that ground game is, because there could be a lot of people who are voting top of the ticket and then decide where they're going to go.
Well, we're going to find out about the presidential election in our next segment. And when we come back from the short break, after Super Tuesday on March 1st, should we be getting ready for WrestleMania 2016? Trump versus Clinton. Stay tuned. And welcome back. National campaigns are now so expensive that the political whiz kids that decide who should be the nominee for president have decided that well before the political conventions in the summer, we need a nominee. We need candidates. Therefore, both parties began to front load the primaries in order to choose the nominee without conflict, without strife late in the political cycle, and oh, by the way, so we have plenty of time to raise money. Well, the law of unintended consequences is first determined by sociologist Robert Merton, which concluded that large-scale actions by governments have unexpected results. Merton identified two major reasons of this phenomena, that being that the framers of social change are either ignorant, i.e. stupid, about the possibility of far-reaching effects, or that they make errors when they develop their plan for social change. Can you say Donald Trump? Well, it may be presumptuous to make that last statement, but if form holds true after the primary contests are held in the several senates and territories, Alabama, Alaska, American Samoa, Arkansas, Colorado, Georgia, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, and Wyoming. Just think about it. We've had 3 major contests so far: Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, South Carolina, and then Nevada. We got a whole raft of states coming in next Tuesday. The nomination for both parties will be decided, or that's what the smart guys tell us, or will it? I ask you, is it a done deal after Tuesday, Elbridge?
They tell you if you squeeze too hard, a lot of things slip through your fingers. This is a classic example of when you try to build a better mousetrap, how things can go wrong. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, both their campaigns said, how can I beat this strategy? And they're going after it. I don't think there's going to be a clear, outright, total winner after Super Tuesday. There'll be some leaders still up front, but I think you have enough candidates there that'll say, I can fight on. And I think Donald will be stronger. I think Hillary will be stronger. But will their opponents decide, let's quit? No. In fact, there'll probably be more fractured and more arguing, especially in the Republican Party.
All right, well, let's turn to the Republican Party, because that's you, Mark.
I think
the Republican establishment is terrified that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee.
Well,
are they?
I think Eldridge is absolutely right that it's going to take longer than a lot of the smart guys say they are. I'd point out that 8 years ago, one of the strengths of the Barack Obama campaign was that they were prepared for a long, protracted contest, whereas Hillary Clinton tried to front load and win all up front. And we all know what happened there. It went down to the very end, and ultimately Obama won. I think the same thing is going to happen here in the Republican sense, in the sense that it's going to be much more of a long-term process than some of the bright guys say. We'll see another week or so whether that's the case.
But are we going to have the three major candidates in it to the very end? Is Cruz and Rubio going to be in it after Tuesday?
I don't know when one of the. I think Cruz at some point has the weaker of the two paths to winning the nomination, is the more likely to drop out. But I think it's going to go on for a while.
So, Phil, the last time you were on the show, you identified yourself as a Trump supporter.
Yes.
And a Cruz supporter.
Absolutely.
So those are the two outsider candidates.
Right.
So are both of those candidates, I assume that Trump is going to do well on Tuesday, but is the other outside candidate, Cruz, going to stay in the race? And what's going to happen to Rubio?
I think Cruz stays in the race simply because he's built such a great infrastructure. And you're at the point where why do you give up so early in the process? Now, Super Tuesday is going to be important. What a strange phenomena happens is that while people think that candidates dropping out like Jeb and so forth, that will help the remaining candidates, a lot of voters also drop out, and this is what we saw in 2012. Some of these candidates, they were doing quite well, and next thing you know, a lot of support went away, and your presumptive nominee, Romney, became the actual nominee. I think Cruz stays in. I think Rubio ultimately falters possibly after Florida, depending on his performance.
Okay. Now, Susan, let's focus back on the Democratic side.
I think it's more fun focusing on the other side.
Yeah,
myself.
well, we can get you answer the question, and then and then we'll digress. How's that?
Sure.
Is Bernie dead? Is his campaign dead after Tuesday?
He says, and he vows that he's going to go on. If Hillary has a strong showing on Saturday, I think a lot of the wind will be out of his sails. But I think he's going to stay in there till the very end just to be a stickler. And I think that it's interesting. I think on the Democratic side, the party leadership came to the sound judgment earlier that, we could have a dingbat on our, and so
You shouldn't say that about Mrs. Clinton.
no, I'm talking about Senator Sanders. And so I think the party structure is looking at it like, if Sanders is the nominee, we could lose congressional seats. We could
Susan,
lose.
you've got 150 FBI agents currently investigating.
I know that isn't part of this conversation.
I understand that, but in terms of laying out scenarios, your party has all its eggs in one basket. Hillary.
I think your guys wish that you had your eggs all in one basket.
No, we got
Donald Trump doesn't have 100 FBI agents.
We don't know what they have out there right now. All I'm saying is that what this election thus far, I think, has taught both sides of the party, both parties, is that Iowa and New Hampshire are not reflective of anything in this country. And maybe we need to start thinking about what has been discussed in the past.
I think you're just wrong. I think what we found is that Iowa and New Hampshire can have a disproportionate
That's what I'm saying.
That's to ask President Santorum and Huckabee about that.
So this is what I'm saying.
Well, but ask Barack Obama, who took Hillary to task in 2008 and got momentum.
That's right. And
that no one expected.
But this is what I think it has been brought up before. I think we need to start thinking about having regional, days. This doesn't make sense to put the time and effort into two states that don't reflect the country.
Elbridge, you've been wanting to get in here for a while.
Well, one of the points that you brought up with regard to if this FBI, there is a third Democratic candidate that's just sitting in the wing. He's already vice president. He can grab both the sides if, in fact, it comes to a brokered convention because of some of the unexpected consequences.
Well,
so
but
you have that, but wait a
Isn't
minute.
that- don't you have superdelegates that prevent that from happening on the Democratic side? Isn't
But
that
this-
why it's been over from the beginning?
But the superdelegates, in fact, because if there's a concern with the email situation,
Well,
the superdelegates can be transferred
Let's just clear
over.
this up. Barack Obama is not going to let his Justice Department come out and indict Hillary Clinton before the election. I mean, that's just, I mean, you can have 200 agents. You can have 1,000 agents out there. It isn't going to happen.
But
I agree with
It's
that.
just not going to happen.
remember Saturday night, the Saturday Night Massacre? So what happens when a recommendation comes from the FBI for whatever, goes up to the
Okay.
Justice Department, is not acted on, and it gets leaked or gets revealed to the public? You've already got a candidate that's got sky-high negatives, just like Trump. The two of them have
All right.
sky-high negatives. What happens
Look,
then?
Mark,
Still, again, a
I am
third
not-
candidate in
I
the
am-
wings.
I just think you're just expecting a result to happen that is impossible. That the FBI and the Justice Department is a different place than it was 30 years ago. You're not going to see a recommendation come out of this FBI director.
But if you're in the Republican Party, you're like us, do you want Hillary to actually get indicted? Because in some respects that can fuel a lot of,
Correct.
engender a lot of help for her.
Engender help for her?
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
people
Yeah.
look at her as a victim. She's being fought by the evil government. Everyone who's
And
against
again,
a woman.
it's a
All
woman,
that kind of,
the
right.
first viable
Oh,
woman,
man,
and
I
they,
gotta tell
there's the
She
playbook.
is not going to get indicted, and there's no possibility of her getting indicted. You guys are just dreaming.
you're whistling Dixie, and I
If
think we should
you
get
think
back
that.
to where we are in this race.
Yeah,
and
which
let's-
is, I want to talk to the Republicans for a second.
Sure.
Because after the divisive process of the Republican side, at least will Democrats take the election for granted? What do you think, Susan?
No, Democrats are not taking anything for granted. There is too much at stake in this election.
And what's that? What's at stake, Susan?
Supreme
The
Court.
Let's talk about it.
There is a lot at stake with which way our country is going to go. To the
Wait a minute.
Tea Party.
He just answered the question, Susan.
We've had this conversation,
just-
Casey,
Phil,
the
Yeah.
Supreme
What,
Court.
will the Democrats take this election for granted, and
Hell
what's
no.
at stake?
I don't think they're going to take it for granted, but I don't think they're going to be as excited as they were in 2008 and 2012. You have a candidate, the likely nominee from their side, that sounds like a robot all the time. Not very interesting, very old. They're in a 2008 mode, the same way
Trump
that we
is
were as
older
Republicans.
Than her, so come on,
Well,
let's not
yeah,
talk about this
but
old
she's
stuff.
she's
low
old because
energy,
she's
baby.
been
She's
around.
low
She
energy.
is low energy, and she's
Mark.
been around for too long.
She's low energy.
You guys,
Both candidates, both Trump and Clinton. I mean, I understand the partisan, but when you step back and objectively, both of them have very, very high negatives and unfavorables. So what will be driving, if the two of them are the nomination, is people will be who do I choose between
you're
them?
going to choose the person who's going to be most likely to, who
Right.
can govern. Donald Trump can't govern. I mean, he's going to spend his $10
Donald
million
Trump can
on
govern
a
just
ball.
as well as
Why
Hillary
do-
Clinton can govern.
Look at the
There's no question about
Who
that.
says you're going to vote for somebody who can govern? That
Well,
isn't-
look
that-
at what we
that's-
have.
Actually-
The markets in Japan, China, and Mexico, their money markets are already wavering because of that. The two past presidents in
well,
Mexico
wait,
This
came
what's
out
wrong
and
with
like
that?
this sounds like Hillary's rationale in 2008 in the Democratic primary, and we know how well that
No,
worked
I'm
then.
saying
Wait a minute, I want to
think
go. I want to go to Elbridge. We can come back to this part. Elbridge. The real issue is, can Hillary put together the same coalition of support, particularly in the minority community, that Barack Obama had in 8 and 12 to win the election? Will blacks come out to vote for Hillary?
Thanks to the Republican Senate, yes, because the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court nominee, or the lack thereof, are going to be the rallying points.
Do you think the
about-
average voter really cares
Yes.
about the Supreme
Yes.
Court?
And I
But
think
this is where Black Lives Matters. In the black community, that will be the rallying point, because the Supreme Court, because our laws,
What's the tangent between the Supreme Court and Black Lives Matter?
civil rights,
voting
economic
rights.
voting rights.
What are the civil rights
Women's
that are being
rights.
impacted by taking the appropriate time in confirming a justice?
Because no, we're talking about
The
we're talking about
Constitution says the
yeah,
president
we're talking about not
appoints.
rationality. We're talking about emotionalism.
Wait, there's a
and an
50%
emotional
chance.
people vote on their emotions.
Yeah.
Okay, and the emotions that the Supreme Court has taken away voting rights and voting opportunities, because you have situations in Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Pennsylvania where they're trying to restrict voting rights. Your own party is going to be
How are we
the
trying to
catalyst
restrict voting rights in these
with these
states?
voter IDs.
What is
With voter
Okay,
wait a
so-
minute,
Didn't
in
Congress pass
in
the Real ID
in
Act?
Alabama, will you take away the
That has
opportunity
nothing
to
to do
get
with voting.
to register to be a voter?
Please,
Okay.
okay, let
There
me
are
ask you a
places where
question.
you
If-
have done things that are like
I want to
gonna
All
come
of
to your
this is
neighborhood without an
irrelevant.
ID and vote in your local
That's not
election.
the case.
All right,
See,
that's a great
guys,
idea.
Phil-
I want to
dominant-
rein.
Guys,
wait a minute.
the
Susan,
thing is,
Susan, I
it's
wanna rein
all
this in.
irrelevant because Donald Trump is going to continue to insult people. Right now, he has insulted the
wait a minute.
Latinos. He's insulted people who have disabilities. He continues this. Nobody's going to vote for him except maybe you, Phil. I know plenty of Republican friends who are saying, I'm waiting to vote for Hillary. I recall how good the economy was under her husband. I'm ready to take her on.
And we've been
Those are the
picking off
same-
Democrats who want to vote for Trump. I mean, it
Exactly.
cuts both ways.
So he can spend $10 million on a ballroom. First thing he wants to do in the White House. Yep, that's my kind of candidate.
You know, this has been a great discussion, and we got to wrap it up. If
It's over?
It's been this much fun, and we got another 6 months of this type of back and forth. That's great. Stay tuned for Parting Shots. And welcome back. Now with Parting Shots, Susan Heltemes.
There have been a lot of issues in this county related to drunk driving. The kids who were killed last year after the Wooten party, Officer Leota killed on the Pike. And so there are a couple of bills that have been introduced, increasing the penalties for parents or adults having children's parties going up to a $5,000 fine and a year in jail. And then the ignition locks for people who have a lower alcohol level than current. I think both of them are really good things, and if any of you know people that you can bully in the state legislature, we need to get them out of Joe Valerio's committee.
Thank you, Susan. Elbridge James, your parting shot.
Parting shot goes against the governor and the legislator who want to spend $1.2 or $1.3 million on camera so they can televise the sessions. I think at a time when we're talking about budget cuts and other concerns, that's money that can be spent other places. You want to have a private enterprise come in and donate that cost, that's another thing. But spending money where we're cutting back on education and other things, that's a concern.
Elbridge, people need to be able to get a good night's sleep, and if they watch that, they will definitely fall asleep. Mark Uncapher, your parting
So
shot.
why spend the money?
In the past couple weeks or past week, the mayor of D.C. and the county executive Ike Leggett went to Cuba on what can only be described as a junket or a junket disguised as a trade mission. It would have been appropriate for the county executive to visit some of the jails. Amnesty International has identified that Cuba continues to oppress political prisoners. Indeed, Montgomery County resident Alan Gross was held in those jails for quite some time instead of this kind of so-called trade mission that took place.
Thank you, Mark. Phil, wrap it up for us, please.
Well, I want to say a little something about blood testing company Theranos. A lot of people have probably heard about it. A $9 billion valuation and started by a 31-year-old back when she dropped out of college. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to crash and burn, but I think it was a great example of what the American dream can be by building something from nothing into something that was great.
Thank you, Phil. And the best part of Phil's parting shot was he didn't mention the New York Mets a single time, and that
We have
and
a
that,
month.
and that spring training has already begun. We had fun here tonight. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest political talk show. I want to thank the panel who really are passionate about politics, but are passionate about their country and about their state and about our county for being here every Friday, giving up their time. So for 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.
Gee, since we talked about it, I guess we can't talk.